We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Kingdom and its King. Victor Reeves stood at the window of his penthouse office, surveying Philadelphia's skyline as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city he'd conquered. At 45, he'd built Phoenix Security Solution from nothing into the most sought-after private security firm on the East Coast. His company protected celebrities, politicians, and corporate executives, people who needed more than just guards but comprehensive security architecture. The son of a blue-collar factory worker and a nurse, Victor had joined the Marines at 18, served 10 years in Force Recon, and returned home with skills few civilians possessed. His time in Afghanistan and Iraq had hardened him, but also taught him the value of loyalty, precision, and contingency planning. "Mr. Reeves, your 4 o'clock is here," his assistant Lena said through the intercom. Victor straightened his custom suit. "Send them in." Senator Howard Bennett entered with his chief of staff. The politician had received death threats after pushing legislation against a powerful pharmaceutical company. "Your security assessment was thorough, Victor," Bennett said after pleasantries. "But the price tag?" Victor's face remained impassive. "Senator, you're paying for the best. This isn't just guards and cameras. It's behavioral analysis, digital protection, and a team that's protected diplomats in war zones." The meeting concluded with a signed contract. Victor never compromised on quality or price, a philosophy that had made him wealthy. Later that evening, Victor drove his Aston Martin to his estate in Villanova's exclusive neighborhood. The sprawling property, protected by security systems of his own design, represented everything he'd built. As the gates opened automatically, recognizing his vehicle, he thought about his wife Marilyn waiting inside, a former pharmaceutical sales rep who'd caught his eye at a charity gala 8 years ago. Their marriage had been passionate at first, but had cooled over the past 2 years. Victor had attributed it to his work schedule and her passion project, a foundation helping veterans with PTSD. They still maintained appearances, attending galas and hosting dinner parties for Philadelphia's elite. Victor entered the house to find Marilyn preparing for their upcoming anniversary party. At 39, she remained stunning, blonde hair professionally styled, her fit figure maintained through religious attendance and exclusive gym. "How was your day?" she asked, barely looking up from her tablet. "Productive. Signed a Bennett contract." "That's nice," she said distractedly. "Listen, I need to meet with the event planner tomorrow." And Thomas called. He'd like to discuss the new security protocol for the Morgan clients. Thomas Wilson had been Victor's roommate at Penn State before Victor enlisted. When Victor started Phoenix Security, Thomas was his first hire despite lacking military experience. Now as chief operations officer, Thomas handled client relations while Victor focused on strategy and high-profile cases. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter Olivia, away at her first year of college at Brown University. "Can't wait to see you at the party this weekend, Dad." He smiled genuinely for the first time that day. Olivia was his weakness, brilliant, compassionate, and a spitting image of him rather than Marilyn. His daughter had been the stabilizing force in their family. That night, as Marilyn slept beside him, Victor lay awake. Something felt off, but he couldn't place it. In the military, this feeling had saved his life multiple times, a sixth sense for danger. But here, in his fortress surrounded by people he trusted, what could possibly be wrong? Chapter 2. The Betrayal Unfolds. The anniversary party at the Reeves estate was Philadelphia high society's event of the season. The guest list included politicians, business leaders, and old friends, a testament to the power couple's influence. Victor stood at the bar, nursing a whiskey, watching Marilyn charm a group of potential donors for her foundation. Across the room, Thomas entertained clients with stories Victor knew were embellished. Their friendship had evolved from college buddies to business partners, though Victor had always been the alpha. "Quite the party, boss," said Derek Moss, approaching the bar. A former Army Ranger, Derek headed Phoenix's Tactical Operations Division. Unlike many at the party, Derek's respect was earned through competence rather than social standing. "Marilyn outdid herself," Victor replied, nodding toward his wife. She's something, Derek said, an odd note in his voice that Victor couldn't place. Listen, can we talk privately next week? Something about the Reynolds contract doesn't add up. Before Victor could probe further, Senator Bennett approached, pulling him into a political discussion. By the time Victor looked for Derek again, he had disappeared into the crowd. The following Wednesday, Victor was reviewing security protocols in his home office when his private line rang. Few people had this number. Reeves. Mr. Reeves, this is Detective Isabel Cortez with Philadelphia PD. We need to speak with you immediately regarding an urgent matter. 2 hours later, Victor sat in an interrogation room, facing Detective Cortez and her partner, Detective Robert Lawrence. The sterile room felt surreal. Victor had built his career on protecting others from danger, not facing it himself. Mr. Reeves, do you know Leonard Phelps? Cortez asked, sliding a photo across the table. Victor studied the image of a rough-looking man with a scar across his cheek. Never seen him before. That's interesting, Lawrence interjected, because we have evidence of multiple payment from Shell Company connected to you in a Mr. Phelps account. That's impossible, Victor said calmly, years of crisis management kicking in. I don't use shell companies. Leonard Phelps is a hitman. Mr. Reeves, Cortez continued. He was arrested attempting to purchase illegal weapons. Claims he was hired to kill a prominent Philadelphia businessman. Care to guess who? Victor's mind raced. This is absurd. Detective Lawrence opened a folder. We have bank records, Mr. Reeves, and text messages from a burner phone registered to your company, arranging the hit on Maxwell Porter. The name hit Victor like a physical blow. Maxwell Porter, CEO of Porter Pharmaceuticals, had recently outbid Victor's company for a major security contract. I want my lawyer, Victor said, immediately recognizing a setup. Within hours, the media exploded with the story. Security mogul arrested for murder plot. The evidence mounted rapidly. Financial records showing transfers from accounts Victor had never seen, text messages he never sent, and finally, Leonard Phelps' detailed confession implicating Victor as the mastermind. Victor's high-priced attorney, Bernard Goldman, looked grim during their meetings. They have a strong circumstantial case, Victor. The DA is pushing for no bail given your resources and expertise. The preliminary hearing went exactly as Bernard predicted. Judge Harriet Montgomery denied bail, citing flight risk concerns. As officers led Victor away, he caught a glimpse of Marilyn in the gallery, her face a mask of shock and distress. Beside her sat Thomas, his arms supportively around her shoulders. That night, in his cell, Victor began mentally cataloging everyone with access to his accounts, his phone, his life. Something about the evidence felt too perfect, too convenient. Someone wanted him out of the way, and they'd orchestrated an elaborate plan to make it happen. In the following weeks, as Victor adjusted to prison life, he noticed Thomas visiting Marilyn frequently for company business and moral support. Their hushed conversations in the visitation room and the way their hands occasionally touched did not escape Victor's trained eye for detail. And then came the physical evidence. A guard slipped him surveillance photos showing Thomas entering Victor's home late at night, leaving the following morning. Credit card statements showing dinners at intimate restaurants dating back months before Victor's arrest. Phone records revealing late-night calls between them. Victor's military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotions, to focus on survival first and vengeance later. As a betrayal became clearer, he did not rage or break. Instead, his mind became a steel trap, planning, calculating, and preparing for war. Chapter 3. The Prison Education. County lockup was a far cry from Victor's estate, but he adapted. His military bearing and quiet confidence quickly established that he wasn't to be tested despite being a high-profile prisoner. Within days, he'd sized up the power structure and positioned himself as a neutral party, respectful to established hierarchies while giving no indication of weakness. Victor's cellmate, Malcolm Davis, was serving time for armed robbery. Initially wary of the rich white guy, Malcolm gradually developed respect for Victor's stoicism and intelligence. "Man, you different," Malcolm observed one night after lights out. "Most suits come in here crying about their Egyptian cotton sheets. You ain't complained once. Complaining changes nothing, Victor replied. I've slept in worse places than this. Malcolm chuckled. Military, right? My brother was Marines. Said it prepared him for anything, except coming home. A connection formed between them, and Malcolm began introducing Victor to other inmates. Former financial criminals who could educate him on money laundering, hackers who explained digital forensics weaknesses, and lifers who'd mastered the art of patience and timing. Victor absorbed everything, recognizing each lesson as a potential weapon for his arsenal. While the prosecution built their case, he built his knowledge base. Meanwhile, his attorney brought troubling news during each visit. The evidence against him grew stronger. A witness claimed to have overheard Victor threatening Porter at a business function. The hitman provided more detailed accounts of their supposed meetings. They're offering a deal, Bernard said. Plead guilty to solicitation of murder. Serve 15 years instead of facing trial and potentially life. Not interested, Victor replied. Someone set me up, and I need to know who before I make any moves. Bernard leaned forward. Victor, I've hired independent forensic accountants. The money trail is sophisticated professional level. Whoever did this knew your business intimately. That narrows the field, Victor said, his expression revealing nothing. Victor's daughter Olivia visited whenever her college schedule allowed. Unlike Marilyn, whose visits had become perfunctory and awkward, Olivia remained steadfastly loyal. Mom's acting strange, she confided during one visit. Always on her phone, jumpy when I ask questions. And Thomas is at the house all the time, supposedly working on company matters. Victor maintained a calm facade for his daughter. Focus on your studies, sweetheart. I'm handling things from here. What Victor didn't tell Olivia was that he'd begun building a network outside prison walls. Derek Moss visited under the pretense of discussing former client matters, but actually brought information about Phoenix Securities operations and, more importantly, about Thomas and Marilyn. They're not even being subtle anymore, Derek reported. Thomas has effectively taken control of the company. Several loyal employees have been let go, replaced with his people. Victor nodded, processing this information. And the Reynolds contract Derek mentioned at the party? Derek's expression darkened. Found irregularities in the billing. Thomas created shadow accounts, skimming from major contracts for at least a year. I've been gathering evidence. Keep it secure, Victor instructed. Trust no one else with this. 5 months into Victor's incarceration, a new inmate arrived. Leonard Phelps, the supposed hitman. The prosecution had transferred him to the same facility ahead of the trial, a procedural mistake that played perfectly into Victor's hands. That night, Malcolm approached Victor in the yard. My cousin works in the kitchen. For the right price, he can make sure Phelps and you have a private conversation tomorrow. Victor slipped Malcolm a visitor's gift. Commissary money disguised as family photos. Make it happen. The following day, Victor found himself alone with Phelps in the kitchen storage room. The hitman's eyes widened in recognition and fear. You set me up, Victor said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Look, man, I just did what I was paid to do, Phelps stuttered. They said you'd never know. Who paid you? I don't know names. Professional arrangement, dead drops, burner phones. Victor moved closer, his voice deadly quiet. You're going to recant your testimony. Phelps backed against the shelves. They'll kill me. I'll kill you if you don't, Victor countered. Slowly. But help me, and I'll ensure you're protected. Fear flickered across Phelps' face. The woman, blonde, expensive clothes. She approached me through an intermediary. Said her husband needed to disappear. Made it look like a business rivalry gone bad. Described the intermediary. Tall guy, always wearing suits. Talked like he knew security, used proper terminology. Called himself Michael. But I heard the woman call him Tom once when she thought I wasn't listening. Victor revealed nothing, though this confirmation ignited a cold fury within him. Evidence. I need evidence. There's a safety deposit box at First National under the name Gregory Smith. Key is with my personal effects police confiscated. Has recordings of our meetings, original payment information. 2 weeks later, Leonard Phelps requested a meeting with the district attorney. He recanted his entire testimony, claiming detectives had coerced his confession with promises of a reduced sentence on previous charges. When confronted with inconsistencies in his story, Phelps revealed the location of evidence proving Victor's innocence. The case began unraveling quickly. The safety deposit box contained recordings of meetings between Phelps, Marilyn, and Thomas discussing how to frame Victor. Bank records showed the original source of funds came from accounts only Marilyn and Thomas could access. Detective Isabel Cortez, whose instincts had always questioned the too-perfect evidence, reopened the investigation, this time focusing on Marilyn Reeves and Thomas Wilson. 7 months after his arrest, Victor stood before Judge Montgomery again. In light of new evidence and the recantation of key testimony, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Victor Reeves, the prosecuting attorney announced, unable to meet Victor's gaze. Case dismissed, the judge declared, bringing down her gavel. As Victor walked out of the courthouse, a free man once more, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket, returned along with his other personal effects. A text message from Olivia lit up the screen. "Hey Dad, remember your best friend Tom, who testified against you? He and Mom just announced they've been secretly married for 6 months, while you were in prison awaiting trial. They've been planning this since before she hired that hitman to kill you, the one who confessed and cleared your name." Victor smiled for the first time in months. A cold, calculating smile that would have terrified anyone who truly knew him. His revenge would be ruthless. Chapter 4. Rising from the Ashes. The Uber dropped Victor at a modest apartment building in northeast Philadelphia, far from his Villanova estate. Derek Moss had arranged the rental under a pseudonym, ensuring Victor would have a secure base of operations away from media scrutiny. The one-bedroom unit was sparsely furnished but contained everything Victor had requested: multiple laptops, secure phones, and a comprehensive file on Thomas Wilson and Marilyn Reeves' activities during his incarceration. Victor showered, shaved 7 months of prison beard, and dressed in clothes Derek had purchased. Looking in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Leaner, harder, his eyes holding a coldness that hadn't been there before. His phone rang. "Olivia, Dad, are you okay? Where are you staying? I can come." "I'm fine, sweetheart," he interrupted gently. "It's better if you don't know my location right now. How are you holding up?" Olivia's voice cracked. "I'm disgusted. Mom and Thomas tried to convince me you were guilty even after the case fell apart. They're already living in your house, running your company. Thomas even had the nerve to suggest I call him stepdad now." Victor's jaw tightened. "Don't worry about them. Focus on your studies. I'll handle everything else." "What are you going to do?" "Better you don't know the details. But justice will be served, I promise you that." After hanging up, Victor turned to Derek's files. The evidence was damning. Thomas had systematically undermined Victor's business for years, creating shadow accounts and skimming profits. Meanwhile, Marilyn had orchestrated the attempted murder plot, using company information only an insider could know. Their plan had been meticulous: remove Victor, consolidate power over Phoenix security, and live off the profits of his life's work. They'd almost succeeded. Victor's phone rang again. Bernard Goldman. "Victor, we need to discuss your options. The civil suit against the city for wrongful prosecution, regaining control of your company." "Not yet," Victor interrupted. "I need time to strategize." "Time benefits them, not you," Bernard warned. "They've moved quickly to consolidate control. The board's been misled about your intentions." "Let them believe I'm broken for now," Victor replied. "It'll make what comes next more effective." After the call, Victor contacted a name from Malcolm's prison network: Alyssa Parker, a former cybersecurity expert who'd served time for ethical hacking and now worked privately for clients requiring discretion. They met at a diner in Kensington, far from the upscale restaurants Victor typically frequented. Alyssa was younger than he expected, maybe 30, with quick eyes that assessed everything around them. "Derek vouched for you," she said without preamble. "Said you needed digital surveillance that can't be traced." Victor pushed an envelope across the table. 10,000 now, 40 more when you deliver. I need eyes and ears everywhere they go." Alyssa peeked inside, then nodded. "Phones, home systems, vehicles?" "All of the above." plus company servers and their cloud accounts. She raised an eyebrow. That's comprehensive and highly illegal. So is framing someone for attempted murder, Victor replied coldly. 2 days later, Alyssa delivered a laptop with custom software. It's all here. Real-time access to their devices, accounts, everything. The system will alert you to keywords in conversations or unusual activities. How did you get past their security? Victor asked, impressed despite himself. Alyssa smiled grimly. Your ex-wife uses your daughter's birthday for most passwords. Your former friend isn't much better. Uses old college references. People are predictable, especially those who think they're untouchable. Armed with this digital window, Victor began monitoring their every move. The conversations he witnessed confirmed his darkest suspicions. Thomas and Marilyn frequently laughed about Victor's imprisonment, discussing how they planned it for over a year. I told you it would work, Marilyn said during one recorded conversation. Victor was always so focused on external threats, he never saw the danger at home. The board still has questions, Thomas replied. Some of them are loyal to him. Then replace them, Marilyn said dismissively. We have controlling interests now. Victor cataloged every betrayal, name mentioned, vulnerability exposed. The cold fury that had sustained him in prison crystallized into something more dangerous, calculated purpose. Meanwhile, he made strategic moves in plain sight. He gave a single interview to the Philadelphia Inquirer, portraying himself as a man shell-shocked by betrayal, focusing on recovery rather than revenge. I just want to rebuild my life, he told the reporter, projecting vulnerability. The legal system will handle the rest. The article painted Victor as a broken man, exactly the impression he wanted Thomas and Marilyn to have. Let them believe him defeated while he prepared for war. In the apartment, Victor created an operations center with 3 computers tracking different aspects of his targets' lives. On the walls, he mapped their routines, relationships, and weaknesses. Each day, he added new information, looking for patterns and vulnerabilities. One name kept appearing in their communications: Lawrence Kingsley, the lawyer handling their corporate restructuring. Kingsley had helped them push through changes to company governance while Victor was incarcerated, leveraging relationships with board members. Victor had Alyssa focus on Kingsley's communications. Within days, they discovered his vulnerability, a gambling problem he kept hidden from his prestigious law firm. Massive debts to offshore betting sites, covered by increasingly desperate loans. Perfect. Victor arranged a meeting with Kingsley at a downtown steakhouse. The lawyer arrived looking nervous, obviously torn between fear of Victor and curiosity about the meeting's purpose. Mr. Reeves, I want to say how pleased I am about your exoneration, Kingsley began, voice oily with fake sincerity. Victor let him squirm through small talk before placing a folder on the table. I know about the gambling, Lawrence. The loans from questionable sources. The money laundering through client accounts to cover your tracks. The color drained from Kingsley's face. How did you? Not important. What matters is what happens next. Victor leaned forward. You have 2 options. Work with me to rectify the corporate situation, or I send this evidence to your firm's ethics committee, the Bar Association, and the IRS. Kingsley swallowed hard. What exactly would working with you entail? Information, primarily. Board meeting details, off-record conversations, strategy plans. And when the time comes, your testimony about how Thomas and Marilyn manipulated company governance. They'd ruin me. I'll ruin you if you don't, Victor countered. But help me, and I'll ensure your debts are cleared and your reputation remains intact. By dessert, Kingsley had agreed to everything. Victor's first chess piece was in position. Next, Victor focused on the Phoenix Security board members. Through Kingsley, he learned that 3 had been replaced with Thomas's allies, but 4 original members remained, including Walter Durham, Victor's longest-serving client from his early days. Victor visited Durham at his home in Society Hill, a historic townhouse filled with antiques reflecting the old money behind Durham Investments. I wondered when you'd surface, Durham said, pouring scotch for them both. Terrible business, all of it. Walter, I need to understand what's happened at Phoenix. Durham sighed heavily. Thomas moved quickly after your arrest, presented evidence you were embezzling funds, claimed the company needed new leadership to survive the scandal. Marilyn supported him, used her shares combined with his to force emergency measures. And you believe this? Of course not, Durham snorted. I've known you 20 years, Victor, but they had documentation, board support, and you were unavailable. By the time questions arose, they'd secured enough power to silence opposition. Victor nodded. I'm planning to take back what's mine. Dangerous game, Durham warned. They've consolidated well. The company's actually expanding, new government contracts, international clients. All built on my foundation, Victor replied. I need allies on the inside, Walter. Durham studied him carefully. You're not the same man who went into prison. No, Victor agreed. I'm not. Good, Durham said firmly. Because the old Victor wasn't ruthless enough for what you're contemplating. By the end of the evening, Victor had secured Durham's support and connections to two other board members who harbored doubts about Thomas's leadership. The pieces were falling into place, but Victor knew he needed more than corporate maneuvering. Thomas and Marilyn had tried to destroy his life. Justice demanded a more personal reckoning. Through illicit surveillance, Victor discovered Thomas had a secret even Marilyn didn't know. A mistress named Vanessa Lambert, a young executive at a client company. Their affair predated Thomas's relationship with Marilyn. Victor arranged to meet Vanessa at her gym, approaching her after her regular spinning class. Ms. Lambert? Victor Reeves. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Her eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Reeves, I've seen you in the news. Let's discuss Thomas Wilson over coffee, shall we? I think you'll find I have some interesting information about his recent marriage. Vanessa's face shifted from shock to anger as Victor revealed Thomas's duplicity. He told me Marilyn was a temporary arrangement for business purposes, she said, voice trembling. Said once the company transition was complete, he'd leave her. Thomas has a pattern of using people until they're no longer useful, Victor observed. I'm offering you a chance to protect yourself and assist in some necessary justice. By the time they parted, Vanessa had agreed to document Thomas's promises and provide access to his personal laptop during their next rendezvous. Systematically, Victor continued building his network of allies and informants. Each person Thomas and Marilyn had used, betrayed, or underestimated became a potential asset. Like gathering intelligence behind enemy lines, Victor mapped the terrain of their lives, identifying points of vulnerability and pressure. 7 weeks after his release, Victor had assembled everything he needed. His wall of evidence had become a comprehensive battle plan, with primary targets, contingencies, and timetables. The digital surveillance had revealed their security weaknesses, daily routines, and most importantly, their arrogant certainty that Victor posed no threat. It was time to begin. Chapter 5. The Invisible Hand. Winter descended on Philadelphia as Victor moved to the second phase of his plan. From his command center in the anonymous apartment, he monitored Thomas and Marilyn's activities through Alyssa's surveillance network. They had grown comfortable in their victory, believing Victor too broken to retaliate. Their complacency was his greatest advantage. The quarterly board meeting is next Thursday, Lawrence Kingsley reported during one of their clandestine meetings at a diner in Fishtown. Thomas plans to announce international expansion, security contracts in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. Victor nodded, making notes. What about the financial reports? Kingsley hesitated. Selectively presented. The company's profitable, but there are signs of cash flow issues they're concealing. Thomas has been redirecting funds from established client contracts to finance the expansion. Exactly what I needed, Victor said, sliding an envelope across the table. Your gambling debts with Malay Casino are cleared. The next phase begins tomorrow. The following morning, Walter Durham requested a private review of Phoenix Securities' complete financial records, citing his fiduciary duty as board chair. Thomas attempted to provide sanitized versions, but Durham insisted on raw data, backed by the company bylaws Victor had written years earlier. Simultaneously, 2 other board members began questioning decisions made during Victor's incarceration, particularly the hasty replacement of key executives with Thomas's allies. Small pressure points, precisely applied. Meanwhile, Victor implemented the personal aspect of his strategy. Using information from Alyssa's surveillance, he identified Marilyn's vulnerable areas. Her reputation as a philanthropist supporting veterans' causes was her pride, a carefully crafted public image that contrasted with her private contempt for the military personnel she claimed to champion. Victor contacted Simone Washington, an investigative journalist he'd once helped when she received threats covering military contractor scandals. They met at Reading Terminal Market, the busy food hall providing cover for their conversation. "I want to be clear," Victor said after explaining his situation. "I'm not asking you to publish anything false. Just investigate thoroughly." Simone studied the financial documents he provided. These show her foundation misappropriating donations meant for veteran rehabilitation programs. "Follow the money," Victor replied. "The Marilyn Reeves Foundation solicits donations for PTSD treatment centers, but only 30% reaches actual programs. The rest finances her administrative costs, travel, events, salary." Simone's eyes narrowed. "If these numbers are accurate, this is serious fraud." "They're accurate. And there's more. Recordings of her mocking veterans at private events, calling them damaged goods useful for photo opportunities." 3 days later, Simone published the first in a series of exposés on charity fraud, prominently featuring Marilyn's foundation. The article included damning financial records and anonymous quotes from foundation employees describing Marilyn's disrespect toward veterans. The public reaction was swift and merciless. Major donors publicly withdrew support. The foundation's social media accounts were flooded with outrage. Organizations that had partnered with Marilyn distanced themselves. Her carefully constructed image began crumbling. Marilyn appeared on a local morning show to defend herself, blaming disgruntled employees and accounting errors. Her performance was polished but unconvincing, especially after Simone released audio recordings of Marilyn disparaging veterans during a private foundation event. Through Alyssa's surveillance, Victor watched Marilyn rage in private, throwing expensive objects at walls and screaming accusations at her staff. Perfect. While Marilyn dealt with public relations damage, Victor focused on Thomas. Using information from Vanessa Lambert, he began systematically targeting Phoenix Security's international expansion, Thomas's pet project, and bid for industry recognition. Victor contacted former military contacts, now working private security overseas. Within days, rumors circulated in industry channels questioning Phoenix's capabilities in foreign markets. Key prospects received anonymous information packages highlighting discrepancies in Thomas's claimed experience and qualifications. At the same time, Victor had Alyssa plant digital evidence of communication between Thomas and controversial political figures in target countries. Nothing overtly illegal, but ethically questionable enough to raise red flags during due diligence reviews. The Eastern European contract fell through first. Then Southeast Asia. Thomas scrambled to salvage the deals, making desperate promises that further compromised the company's position. Between managing the international crisis and Marilyn's publicity nightmare, Thomas began making mistakes. He missed important client meetings, snapped at loyal employees, drank heavily during business lunches. Each misstep carefully documented by Victor's growing network of informants within Phoenix Security. Throughout this phase, Victor remained invisible, a ghost orchestrating chaos without revealing his hand. While Thomas and Marilyn's world unraveled, Victor cultivated the final pieces of his strategy. He reconnected with former Phoenix Security employees Thomas had dismissed, particularly those with specialized technical knowledge of the company's proprietary security systems. Under the guise of a new startup venture, Victor gathered information about security vulnerabilities Thomas had neglected to address. One such employee, Nancy Fletcher, had been Phoenix's lead system architect before Thomas replaced her with his less experienced associate. "He gutted my security protocols," Nancy explained during their meeting. "Said they were too expensive, too complex. Replaced military-grade encryption with commercial solutions that look good in presentations but have known vulnerabilities." Victor nodded. "Can you document the specific weaknesses?" Nancy smiled grimly. "Already have. Been keeping a record since he forced me out. The Phoenix system protecting their high-profile clients has at least 7 exploit vectors Thomas ignored when I flagged them. These technical vulnerabilities became another weapon in Victor's arsenal. Through Derek Moss's connections, information about Phoenix Security's system weaknesses began circulating among legitimate security professionals. Not enough to endanger clients, but sufficient to raise serious questions about the company's capabilities. Government security contractors, who comprised 40% of Phoenix's client base, began requesting extraordinary security audits. Thomas, already stretched thin, managing multiple crises, struggled to address these concerns. For months after beginning his campaign, Victor received a call from Walter Durham. The board called an emergency meeting, Durham reported. Thomas is facing a no-confidence vote. 3 government contracts have been suspended pending security reviews. The stock has dropped 22% in 3 weeks. In Maryland, Victor asked, barely involved anymore. The foundation scandal has consumed her attention. She's facing potential investigations from the Attorney General's Charity Oversight Division. Victor allowed himself a small smile. Time for the next phase. The following week, during a crucial client presentation to salvage a key contract, Thomas Wilson's personal and company devices simultaneously received the same text message. I know what you did. Security camera footage captured his visible panic, the way he abruptly left the meeting claiming a family emergency. Through Alyssa surveillance, Victor watched Thomas race home to find Marilyn equally disturbed, having received identical messages on every device she owned: phone, tablet, laptop, even the smart TV. Someone's watching us, Thomas said, voice shaking as he poured a large whiskey. Do you think it's him? Impossible, Marilyn insisted, though her trembling hands betrayed her uncertainty. Victor doesn't have the technical expertise. He's probably still licking his wounds, trying to rebuild his reputation. Then who? The messages came to accounts only we know about. As they argued, neither noticed the small anomalies in their smart home system. Lights flickering briefly, thermostats adjusting, security cameras rotating slightly. Victor, watching remotely, had Alyssa demonstrate just how vulnerable they truly were. That night, as Thomas and Marilyn slept, their phones simultaneously played an audio recording at maximum volume. Their own voices discussing the hitman plot against Victor. They awoke panicked, searching for devices. Finding none, Thomas did a sweep for bugs, discovered nothing. They changed passwords, reset devices, even called a professional security team, who found no physical intrusions. The psychological pressure mounted. Random text messages arrived at unpredictable times. Home automation systems activated without command. Car navigation systems rerouted to meaningless destinations. Each incident small enough to seem like a technical glitch, but the pattern undeniable. Their paranoia grew. Thomas began suspecting Marilyn had hidden backups of incriminating evidence. Marilyn questioned whether Thomas was creating these incidents to manipulate her. Their alliance, built on mutual betrayal, began fracturing under pressure. Meanwhile, Victor prepared for the final confrontation, meticulously arranging each element for maximum impact. The invisible hand that had been slowly tightening around them was about to become very visible indeed. The stage was set. The players were positioned. And Victor Reeves was ready to reclaim everything that had been taken from him, and exact a price far beyond what Thomas and Marilyn could ever have anticipated. Chapter 6: Fracturing the Facade. 9 months after his release from prison, Victor Reeves sat at a corner table in Del Frisco's steakhouse, watching the entrance while appearing engrossed in the wine list. The restaurant, a favorite for Philadelphia's business elite, provided the perfect setting for the next phase of his plan. At precisely 7:15 p.m., Walter Durham arrived with Lawrence Kingsley and 2 other Phoenix Security Board members. Victor observed them being seated at a prominent table, visible from most angles in the dining room. Perfect. Mr. Reeves? The maitre d' approached discreetly. Your other guest has arrived. Victor nodded. Please show her in. Detective Isabel Cortez looked different out of uniform, her professional attire replaced by an elegant cocktail dress that disguised her law enforcement bearing. She slid into the seat across from Victor, her expression unreadable. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Reeves," she said after ordering a whiskey neat. "Meeting with the subject of an active investigation." "Yet here you are," Victor replied. "Because what I promised matters more than procedural correctness." Cortez studied him carefully. "You claim to have evidence that Thomas Wilson and Marilyn Reeves conspired not just to frame you, but to systematically embezzle from Phoenix Security?" Victor placed a flash drive on the table. "Tax evasion, wire fraud, false statements to federal contractors. The financial crimes alone carry 15-year sentences. Why give this to me instead of the FBI? You were the only detective who questioned the too perfect evidence against me," Victor said. "You followed your instincts despite pressure to close the case. I respect that." Cortez pocketed the drive without examining it. "This doesn't erase your extracurricular activities since your release. I know you've been orchestrating their downfall." Victor smiled slightly. "Proving that would be challenging, Detective. I've simply been recovering from my ordeal, as the Philadelphia Inquirer reported." "We both know." She stopped mid-sentence, her attention drawn to the restaurant entrance. Victor didn't need to turn around to know what she was seeing. Right on schedule, Thomas Wilson and Marilyn Reeves were being escorted to their regular Thursday evening table, a tradition they'd maintained despite their mounting troubles. The timing was not coincidental. Victor had ensured both parties would be present tonight. Thomas spotted the board members first. His step faltered briefly before he plastered on a confident smile and approached their table. Marilyn, still scanning the room, froze when her gaze locked with Victor's. The color drained from her face. "Showtime," Victor murmured, raising his glass slightly in her direction. For several seconds, chaos threatened as Marilyn gripped Thomas's arm, whispering urgently. The board members noticed their arrival, expressions hardening. Durham raised a hand in a minimal acknowledgement that carried clear command. "Join us." "What exactly did you orchestrate here?" Cortez asked, professional curiosity overriding her official position. "A business meeting," Victor replied innocently. "One where certain truths become impossible to ignore." At the board table, the atmosphere crackled with tension as Thomas and Marilyn were obliged to join them. Even from a distance, Victor could read the body language. Thomas attempting charm, Marilyn maintaining poise while casting frequent glances toward Victor's table. "The financial records you provided," Cortez said. "How did you obtain them?" "Through entirely legal channels," Victor assured her. "Board members have full access rights." Walter Durham simply exercised his fiduciary responsibility. Their conversation was interrupted by raised voices from the board table. Thomas stood, gesturing emphatically while Kingsley calmly slid documents across the table. Marilyn remained seated, her perfect posture now rigid with tension. "Those would be the preliminary findings from the forensic accounting review," Victor explained, revealing several offshore accounts where client payments were diverted before being recorded at significantly reduced amounts in official books. Cortez raised an eyebrow. Convenient timing. Durham is nothing if not thorough in his preparations. The confrontation escalated, drawing attention from nearby diners. Thomas's face flushed dark red as he jabbed a finger toward Kingsley, who remained impassively seated. Security personnel began moving toward the disturbance. Marilyn, ever conscious of appearances, pulled at Thomas's sleeve, urging restraint. He shook her off, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "You backstabbing vultures! After everything I've done for this company." Durham rose slowly, his commanding presence silencing Thomas momentarily. Though Victor couldn't hear the words, he recognized the deadly serious expression the investment banker reserved for terminal business relationships. Thomas's next move was predictable to Victor, but shocked the other diners. He grabbed a water pitcher and hurled it against the wall, sending glass and water spraying across an adjacent table. "That's our cue," Victor said, rising as restaurant security converged on the scene. "You might want to follow at a discreet distance, Detective." Victor approached the chaos calmly, his first public confrontation with the architects of his downfall, timed for maximum impact. Conversations hushed as diners recognized him. The security mogul betrayed by wife and friend, now walking into the epicenter of their public meltdown. Thomas, Maryland. Victor's voice carried an authority that immediately drew all eyes. This seems rather unprofessional. Thomas whirled to face him, rage giving way to shocked recognition. He lunged toward Victor, but was restrained by security personnel. Mr. Wilson is under considerable stress, Victor explained to the security guards. Financial irregularities at Phoenix Security have recently come to light. Very troubling matters. You orchestrated this, Marilyn hissed, maintaining enough composure to keep her voice down. You've been behind everything. The Foundation investigation, the contract problems. Victor met her gaze evenly. A fascinating theory, almost as creative as your murder-for-hire scheme. Durham cleared his throat. Victor, since you're here, the board was just informing Mr. Wilson that his services as CEO are terminated, effective immediately. Perhaps you'd join us to discuss transition plans? The restaurant had gone silent. Dozens of Philadelphia's business elite witnessing Thomas and Marilyn's public disgrace. Victor noted several people discreetly recording with phones. By morning, this scene would circulate throughout their social and professional circles. Thomas broke free from the security guard's grip. You think you've won? You think you can just walk back in and take everything? I built those international relationships. I secured those government contracts. On foundations I established, Victor replied calmly. With a reputation I earned. Using systems I designed. This isn't over, Thomas snarled. Actually, Detective Cortez said, stepping forward and displaying her badge. It is. Thomas Wilson and Marilyn Reeves, I'm placing you under investigative detention regarding financial crimes connected to Phoenix Security Solutions and the Marilyn Reeves Foundation. The shock on their faces was everything Victor had anticipated. Marilyn recovered first, her socialite training asserting itself. This is absurd. We've done nothing wrong. The federal subpoenas for your banking records suggest otherwise, Cortez replied, gesturing to uniformed officers now entering the restaurant. We can discuss the details at the station. As they were escorted out, not in handcuffs, but clearly in custody, Victor took a seat at the board table. Whispers erupted throughout the restaurant. Thomas's final glare promised retribution, while Marilyn maintained her composure, her only tell the slight trembling of her perfectly manicured hands. Well, Durham said, straightening his tie, that was more dramatic than our usual board meetings. Indeed, Victor replied, reaching for the folder Kingsley had prepared. Shall we discuss the company's transition back to proper leadership? Later that night, after a productive 3-hour meeting with the board, Victor returned to his apartment command center. The evening news carried reports of the restaurant incident, along with speculation about criminal investigations into Phoenix Security's leadership. Victor watched the coverage while Alyssa updated him on surveillance. They've been separated for questioning, she reported. Marilyn invoked attorney privilege immediately. Thomas tried to explain the accounting discrepancies, but contradicted himself repeatedly. Perfect, Victor said. And the other matter? All prepared, Alyssa confirmed. Financial records showing Thomas has been moving money to accounts Marilyn can't access. Evidence he's been planning to leave her once the heat dies down. Plus his text messages with Vanessa discussing their future together. Victor nodded. Send it to Marilyn's attorney in the morning. Anonymous source, concerned about justice. Alyssa hesitated. You realize this will destroy any remaining trust between them? They'll turn on each other completely. That's the intention, Victor replied. United, they're dangerous. Divided, they're vulnerable. The following days unfolded exactly as Victor had orchestrated. Released on bail, but facing serious charges, Thomas and Marilyn's alliance collapsed when Marilyn's attorney presented her with evidence of Thomas's planned betrayal. Their mutual recriminations played out through lawyers, with each attempting to shift blame to the other. Meanwhile, Victor officially returned to Phoenix Security as interim CEO, welcomed by employees tired of Thomas's erratic leadership. The board unanimously supported his reinstatement, particularly after 3 major government contracts were reinstated following Victor's personal assurances about security protocols. Publicly, Victor projected gracious resilience, a man focused on rebuilding rather than revenge. He gave thoughtful interviews about second chances and the importance of proper corporate governance. Not once did he speak ill of Thomas or Marilyn, allowing their own actions to condemn them. Privately, he continued meticulously dismantling their lives. Every account they'd hidden, ally they'd cultivated, escape route they'd planned, systematically exposed and eliminated. Victor didn't just want justice. He wanted them to experience the complete helplessness he'd felt in that prison cell. 3 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, Victor's doorbell rang at his apartment. He checked the security camera to find Olivia waiting, looking resolute. "I know you've been avoiding me," she said when he opened the door. "Trying to keep me separate from whatever you're doing." Victor sighed, gesturing her inside. "To protect you." Olivia surveyed the operations center, the computers, the wall of evidence, the meticulous plans. "You're destroying them." "They tried to destroy me first," Victor replied, watching her reaction carefully. To his surprise, Olivia nodded. "Good. They deserve it." She placed a thumb drive on his desk. "Mom's personal email archives. She doesn't know I had access. There's correspondence with offshore banks dating back 3 years." Victor stared at his daughter, seeing himself reflected in her calculating expression. "You didn't need to involve yourself. They involved me when they tried to convince me my father was a criminal," Olivia said firmly. "When they made me visit you in that place, watching you suffer while they lived in luxury. Family protects family, Dad. You taught me that." Victor embraced her, recognizing that his revenge had created something unexpected, a bond with his daughter forged through shared purpose. He hadn't anticipated this silver lining, but he welcomed it nonetheless. As they reviewed the new evidence together, Victor's phone buzzed with a text from Derek Moss. "Wilson making moves. Meeting with Porter Pharmaceuticals. Damage control." Victor smiled grimly. Thomas was getting desperate, reaching out to the very company he'd used in the murder plot. Predictable, and ultimately futile. Every counter-move Thomas and Marilyn attempted only entangled them further in Victor's web. Their desperation made them predictable, and Victor had planned for every contingency. The facade of their lives had been fractured beyond repair, leaving them exposed and vulnerable for the final phase of Victor's revenge. Chapter 7. Counterattack. Thomas Wilson paced the confined space of his downtown apartment, a far cry from the Villanova estate he'd briefly claimed as his own. 3 months since the Del Frisco's humiliation, his life had become unrecognizable. Phoenix Security had terminated him with cause. The board had frozen his shares pending litigation. Most of his assets were seized or frozen by various authorities investigating financial improprieties. His phone rang. Maxwell Porter, CEO of Porter Pharmaceuticals. "Porter," Thomas answered tersely. "Tell me you have good news." "I've considered your proposal," Porter replied, his voice cool. "The answer is no. My company won't be providing character testimony or financial support for your defense." Thomas gripped the phone tighter. "After everything I've shared about Phoenix's security vulnerabilities, the client lists, the information of questionable legality that would make my company complicit in corporate espionage," Porter interrupted. "Besides, Victor Reeves reached out personally last week to offer a comprehensive security review of our systems, at no charge. A goodwill gesture, he called it." The call ended with Porter wishing Thomas, "Good luck with your legal troubles." Another door slammed shut. Thomas hurled the phone against the wall, watching it shatter. Victor was systematically closing every escape route, turning every potential ally against him. The man Thomas had once considered predictable had transformed into a strategic nemesis always 3 steps ahead. Across town, in her Center City penthouse, the only property the courts had allowed her to retain, Marilyn Reeves faced her own crisis. Her attorney, Patricia Garland, delivered the latest devastating news. "The Foundation's board has voted unanimously to remove your name and disassociate completely," Patricia reported. "They're rebranding as the Philadelphia Veterans Recovery Initiative." Marilyn poured another glass of Chardonnay, her third of the afternoon. "Can they legally do that?" "I founded it. The bylaws you signed give the board that authority in cases of reputational damage," Patricia reminded her. Furthermore, the forensic accountants have completed their preliminary review. The misappropriation of funds is substantial. Those were legitimate administrative expenses. Patricia's expression remained professional but skeptical. Seven-figure administrative expenses for a foundation that size? Luxury travel classified as veteran outreach? The Attorney General won't see it that way. After Patricia left, Marilyn attempted to call Thomas, forgetting they'd stopped communicating directly on legal advice. Their united front had disintegrated when evidence emerged of Thomas's plan to abandon her once Victor was safely imprisoned. Her social circle had evaporated almost overnight. Former friends and charity associates suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Invitations to galas and benefits, once abundant, had ceased entirely. Journalists who once covered her philanthropic efforts now requested comments on fraud allegations. Marilyn's phone chimed with a news alert. Phoenix Security announces major government contract renewal under restored leadership of Victor Reeves. Accompanying the headline was a photo of Victor looking confident and authoritative, shaking hands with a high-ranking Defense Department official. She threw her wine glass at the television, leaving a crimson stain on the white wall. Meanwhile, Victor executed the next phase of his plan from Phoenix Security's headquarters. He'd resumed occupancy of his corner office, though he'd completely redesigned it, removing all traces of Thomas's brief tenure. The wall that once held family photos now displayed the company's core values and security certifications. Derek Moss entered with a tablet displaying recent developments. Thomas approached 3 more Phoenix clients today, offering insider information in exchange for financial help. And they reported this to us immediately, Victor stated rather than asked. All 3. His desperation is showing. Victor nodded. How was the specialized team performing? Exceptional. They've documented every contact attempt, preserved all communications. The counterintelligence case is rock solid. This was Victor's latest strategic move, reclassifying Thomas's desperate attempts to leverage company information as counterintelligence threats, triggering protocols that involve federal authorities specializing in corporate espionage. What might have been viewed as a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge was now positioned as a national security concern due to Phoenix's government contracts. In Maryland's situation? Victor asked. Deteriorating rapidly, Derek reported. The foundation audit revealed approximately $3.7 million in misappropriated donations. The Attorney General is preparing charges. Her attorneys have proposed a settlement, but prosecutors seem intent on making an example of her. Victor permitted himself a small, satisfied nod. And Olivia? Thriving at Brown. Her professors speak highly of her. She calls regularly for updates. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from Lawrence Kingsley. Wilson contacted me. Wants to meet. Says he has leverage against you. Advice. Victor typed back immediately. Agree. Record everything. The first counterstrike came 3 days later. Thomas, growing increasingly desperate, filed a whistleblower complaint with the SEC, alleging Victor had orchestrated the entire financial scandal to regain control of Phoenix Security. He claimed to have evidence Victor had manipulated company records after returning as CEO. Victor had anticipated this move. Within hours, Phoenix Security's legal team provided authorities with chain-of-custody documentation for all financial records, including tamper-proof blockchain verification implemented years earlier, a security measure Thomas had been unaware of when making his accusations. The whistleblower complaint was dismissed within 48 hours, further damaging Thomas's already precarious credibility. Maryland's counterattack took a different approach. Through carefully placed gossip within Philadelphia's social circles, she began suggesting Victor had orchestrated his own imprisonment to generate public sympathy, planning his dramatic return from the beginning. The rumor gained minimal traction before Bernard Goldman filed cease and desist orders against identifiable sources, threatening defamation suits with substantial evidence of malicious intent. Victor watched these futile efforts with clinical detachment. Each desperate move further entangled them in legal consequences while strengthening his position as the wrong party, seeking legitimate justice rather than revenge. The most significant counterstrike came unexpectedly. Detective Robert Lawrence, Isabel Cortez's former partner who had pursued Victor's prosecution so aggressively, held a press conference alleging procedural misconduct in Victor's exoneration. He claimed evidence had been suppressed and witnesses pressured to recant. This presented the first genuine threat to Victor's carefully constructed narrative. Lawrence had credibility with law enforcement and prosecutors that Thomas and Marilyn lacked. Within an hour of the press conference, Victor summoned his crisis team. Lawrence is laying groundwork to reopen the case, Bernard Goldman assessed. His claims are baseless, but could create enough doubt to justify a review, which could temporarily destabilize the company again, Walter Durham added. Markets hate uncertainty. Victor remained calm. Detective Lawrence's sudden concern is interesting, particularly given his financial situation. He nodded to Alyssa, who displayed financial records on the conference room screen. Detective Lawrence has experienced a sudden change in fortune. His underwater mortgage is now current. A previously maxed-out home equity line has been paid off. His children's college tuition, previously in arrears, is now paid through next semester. Total value approximately $175,000, Derek noted, appearing in his accounts through multiple small transfers over the past 2 weeks, all just below reporting thresholds. Traceable, Durham asked. To shell companies recently established in Delaware, Alyssa replied, with circumstantial connections to accounts previously linked to Thomas Wilson. Victor allowed this information to settle before continuing. Detective Cortez should find this very interesting, particularly given her ongoing investigation into corruption within the department. By evening, Detective Lawrence's credibility was under internal investigation. The press conference allegations were overshadowed by questions about his financial irregularities. Another threat neutralized. Throughout these counterattacks, Victor maintained his public persona of reasonable professionalism. In interviews, he expressed concern for the well-being of his former friend and wife, emphasizing their need for proper legal counsel rather than suggesting punishment. This magnanimity in public made their desperate attacks appear increasingly petty and vindictive. They're running out of options, Derek observed during an evening strategy session at Victor's apartment. Not quite, Victor replied. Thomas still has one significant card to play, Marilyn herself. The prediction proved accurate within days. Marilyn received a hand-delivered letter proposing a deal. Thomas would provide evidence that she had acted under his manipulation and coercion, substantially reducing her legal exposure, in exchange for her paying his mounting legal fees. Through Alyssa's surveillance, Victor watched Marilyn read the letter repeatedly, considering her limited options. Her attorney advised against the deal, correctly identifying it as potentially constituting witness tampering. But Marilyn, facing financial ruin and possible imprisonment, was growing as desperate as Thomas. They arranged a clandestine meeting at a suburban hotel, using pseudonyms and cash payments to avoid detection. Victor monitored the meeting remotely, listening as former lovers turned conspirators now negotiated betrayal terms against each other. I have recordings of all our planning sessions, Thomas revealed. Edited versions show you directing everything. I appear reluctant, even resistant. You manipulated recordings? Marilyn asked incredulously. Insurance policy. I never fully trusted you, Marilyn. Just as you never fully trusted me. Their toxic alliance rekindled just enough to form a new conspiracy. Mutual perjury designed to shift primary blame while minimizing individual consequences. They left the meeting with a coordinated story blaming Victor for their financial crimes while portraying themselves as unwitting accomplices. Victor allowed this plan to develop, monitoring their preparation through surveillance and informants. When they filed their revised statements with prosecutors, he made no immediate move to counter them. You're letting them perjure themselves? Bernard asked, concerned. The most effective trap is one the target walks in involuntarily, Victor replied. They're fabricating evidence and coordinating testimony, felonies carrying substantial sentences. By allowing their plan to unfold, we enable prosecutors to add charges rather than just dismiss claims. The strategy worked perfectly. When Thomas and Marilyn presented their coordinated testimony, prosecutors were prepared with evidence of their hotel meeting, their communication planning the perjury, and forensic analysis proving Thomas's recordings were manipulated. What might have been a strategic countermove instead became the final nail in their legal coffins. Both were charged with witness tampering, evidence fabrication, and perjury, crimes that virtually guaranteed prison sentences regardless of the outcome of the original fraud charges. As autumn turned to winter, Victor's systematic dismantling of their counterattacks left Thomas and Marilyn isolated, discredited, and facing non-negotiable criminal charges. Their assets depleted by legal fees, their reputations irreparably damaged. They had exhausted all conventional options for escaping consequences. Victor observed their deterioration with the detached interest of a scientist monitoring an experiment. Thomas began drinking heavily, missing court appearances. Marilyn developed anxiety, requiring medication. Both showed physical signs of stress, weight loss, premature aging, the haunted look of people who know destruction is inevitable. Yet Victor remained vigilant. Experience had taught him that enemies were most dangerous when cornered, when conventional options were exhausted, and when nothing remained to lose. Thomas and Marilyn had tried playing by society's rules in their counterattacks and failed. Their next move would likely abandon those constraints entirely. Victor wasn't just prepared for this escalation. He was counting on it. Chapter 8: The Desperate Gambit. The January wind whipped across the Delaware River as Thomas Wilson hunched inside his threadbare coat, waiting at Penn's Landing well after midnight. His appearance had deteriorated dramatically. Unshaven, hair unkempt, clothes showing wear. 6 months of legal battles had drained his financial resources and physical health. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled alongside the riverfront walkway. The rear door opened. "Get in," ordered a gravelly voice from the dark interior. Thomas hesitated only briefly before complying. The vehicle's warmth was a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. As his eyes adjusted, he made out the silhouette of Salvador Sal Valeni, a name whispered in Philadelphia's underground but rarely spoken aloud in legitimate business circles. "You're looking rough, Wilson," Valeni observed, his Italian-American accent subtle but present. "Been better," Thomas admitted. "Thanks for meeting me." Valeni studied him with cold efficiency. When someone who built security systems for federal buildings suddenly wants to meet, it gets my attention. "What do you want?" Thomas took a deep breath. "I need Reeves gone. Permanently." Valeni's expression didn't change. "That's a significant request. Your former boss has friends in many places, including some who occasionally do business with me. He's destroyed everything I built," Thomas said, desperation evident in his voice. "Taken everything. I'm facing 15 years, minimum. Marilyn, too. And eliminating him solves this how exactly?" Without Victor's testimony, the case weakens substantially. Key evidence becomes inadmissible or questionable. With him gone, I can implement contingency plans I've prepared. Valeni leaned back, assessing Thomas carefully. "What's your offer? You clearly don't have money anymore." "Information," Thomas replied quickly. "Security details for 3 private bank processing centers your organization has been interested in. Server locations, patrol schedules, response protocols. Everything needed for a significant operation with minimal risk." A flicker of interest crossed Valeni's face. "That would be valuable information, if accurate. I designed those systems personally," Thomas assured him. "The information is current as of my departure from Phoenix." Valeni nodded slowly. "I'll need proof of concept before proceeding. Detailed schematics for one location to verify quality." "Once I have your commitment," Thomas countered. "That's not how this works," Valeni said, his tone hardening. "You're not in a position to dictate terms, Mr. Wilson. You'll provide the sample information within 48 hours. If it proves valuable, we'll discuss next steps." Thomas swallowed, recognizing the power dynamic. "Fine. You'll have it. As Thomas was dropped at a different location from where he'd been picked up, as standard precaution, he failed to notice the unmarked van parked 2 blocks away. Inside, Victor Reeves and Derek Moss monitored the entire exchange through directional microphones and thermal imaging equipment. He actually did it, Derek said, removing his headphones. Solicited a hit through Valenti. As anticipated, Victor replied, checking the recording equipment to ensure everything had been properly documented. Send the full audio to Detective Cortez through the secure channel. No attribution. Derek hesitated. You realize this will likely result in a murder solicitation charge? That's 20 years minimum. Yes, Victor confirmed without inflection. That's the idea. Across town, in her considerably more comfortable Center City penthouse, Marilyn Reeves was pursuing her own desperate gambit. Seated across from her was Leonard Phelps, the same hitman who had originally been part of the frame-up against Victor, now released after providing testimony that exonerated him. You've got serious nerve contacting me, Phelps said, clearly uncomfortable in the luxury surroundings. After everything that went down, I'm offering you a chance at significant money, Marilyn replied, pouring him a generous scotch. In revenge against the man who put you in prison. Phelps laughed bitterly. Lady, you put me in prison. You and Wilson. Reeves just flipped me and then abandoned you to the system, Marilyn countered smoothly. Where was his protection when you were sentenced? Did he use his considerable resources to reduce your punishment? Or did he discard you once you'd served your purpose? Her words found their target. Phelps' expression darkened as he contemplated his 18-month sentence while Victor had resumed his wealthy lifestyle. What exactly are you proposing? He asked cautiously. Victor Reeves suffers a tragic accident. You receive $500,000. I've liquidated assets the authorities don't know about. Phelps studied her skeptically. And I should trust you why? After what happened last time? Marilyn slid an envelope across the coffee table. $200,000 up front. The rest upon completion. Phelps opened the envelope, verifying the contents. Neat stacks of $100 bills. How would you envision this accident occurring? That's your expertise, Marilyn said with practiced detachment. Though I understand he takes a regular morning run along the Schuylkill River Trail, typically alone. Perhaps something there. Unbeknownst to either of them, Alyssa Parker monitored their entire conversation through the penthouse's compromised security system. Victor had anticipated Marilyn might attempt direct action and had been surveilling her continuously. The cash payment, visible on high-definition security cameras Marilyn believed were inactive, provided perfect evidence of solicitation. Within hours, Detective Cortez had recordings of both Thomas's meeting with Valenti and Marilyn's arrangement with Phelps. The evidence was irrefutable, the intent clear, and the prosecution's path straightforward. Rather than moving to arrest immediately, however, Cortez, in coordination with Victor, allowed both plots to develop further. Thomas provided the promised security information to Valenti, incriminating himself for industrial espionage and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. Phelps began surveillance of Victor's running route, establishing clear intent. 7 days after the initial meetings, coordinated SWAT teams executed simultaneous arrests. Thomas was taken into custody at his apartment, while Marilyn was arrested during a spa appointment. Phelps was apprehended conducting reconnaissance along the river trail, the cash payment and written instructions in his possession. Valenti, already under federal investigation for unrelated matters, found new charges added to his considerable legal troubles. The arrests made national news. Disgraced executives charged in murder-for-hire plot against former CEO. Victor, portrayed as the target of these heinous schemes, received an outpouring of public sympathy and support. Phoenix Securities' stock price, which had been recovering steadily under his leadership, surged to new highs as the market reacted to the narrative of the righteous leader triumphing over corruption. With the new charges, bail was revoked for both Thomas and Marilyn. They were remanded to separate detention facilities pending trial. Thomas to a medium-security prison outside Philadelphia. Marilyn to a women's correctional facility in Montgomery County. After the arrests, Victor visited Detective Cortez at her precinct office. "Congratulations on the arrests," he said, placing a gift basket of premium coffee and chocolates on her desk. "The department should be commended for thorough police work." Cortez eyed him skeptically. "You know, most people who've been targeted for murder don't look quite so satisfied about it." "Justice brings its own satisfaction," Victor replied diplomatically. "This wasn't just justice, Mr. Reeves. This was meticulous orchestration." She gestured to the case files. Thomas and Marilyn weren't just caught. They were guided every step of the way into increasingly serious crimes. Victor maintained a neutral expression. "They made their own choices. After you created the perfect circumstances for those choices." Cortez leaned forward. "Did you manipulate Leonard Phelps into approaching Marilyn? Did you feed information about Valenti's interests to Thomas?" "The precision of this operation suggests guidance." "That would be difficult to prove," Victor observed calmly. "Nearly impossible," Cortez agreed. "Which is why this conversation is unofficial. But I want you to know that I recognize the strategy. The way you've systematically dismantled their lives, their reputations, their futures, it's been surgical. You sound almost impressed, Detective." "Professionally, I can appreciate the methodology," she admitted. "But I'm curious, is it enough? They're facing life sentences. They've lost everything. Their reputations are destroyed beyond repair. Have you achieved satisfaction?" Victor considered the question genuinely. "Not quite yet. There's still the matter of my daughter." Cortez's expression shifted to concern. "Please tell me you're not involving Olivia Reeves in whatever's coming next." "On the contrary," Victor replied, rising to leave. "This final phase is entirely for her benefit." The following week, as Thomas and Marilyn awaited their preliminary hearings from separate detention facilities, each received an unusual legal visitor. The same attorney, Elliot Winters, met with each of them individually, presenting identical documents. "Who are you?" Thomas demanded in the prison consultation room. "I have counsel already. I represent a special interest party," Winters explained, sliding documents across the table. "Someone offering you a potential lifeline." Thomas scanned the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "This can't be legitimate." "I assure you, it's entirely legal," Winters replied, "though admittedly unusual." The documents outlined a complex legal arrangement. In exchange for a guilty plea to all charges and waiving all rights to appeals, Thomas would receive 3 significant concessions: placement in a minimum security federal facility known for relatively comfortable conditions, a structured settlement providing modest financial support upon eventual release, and most importantly, protection from additional charges relating to other potential crimes under investigation. "Who's behind this?" Thomas asked, suspicious. "My client prefers anonymity," Winters replied smoothly. "But suffice to say, someone with significant influence who believes this resolution serves everybody's interests." Across the city, Marilyn received the identical offer with similar skepticism. "This is Victor's doing," she concluded after reviewing the documents. "Why would he offer any concessions?" "The motivation is irrelevant," Winters countered. "The offer exists and expires in 48 hours. After that, prosecutorial discretion returns to normal channels." For both Thomas and Marilyn, the decision calculated down to brutal mathematics. Without the deal, they faced trial with overwhelming evidence, maximum security imprisonment, and the possibility of additional charges still being investigated. The deal offered certainty, harsh but defined consequences with a pathway, however distant, back to some version of normal life. Separately, but simultaneously, they accepted the terms. 1 week later, in a courtroom closed to press, Thomas Wilson and Marilyn Reeves entered guilty pleas to all charges. The judge, following the unusual but legally sound plea agreement, sentenced them according to the predetermined terms. The proceedings took less than an hour, an anticlimactic end to what might have been a sensational trial. That evening, Victor sat in his rebuilt office at Phoenix Security Headquarters, watching the sunset over Philadelphia. Walter Durham entered, closing the door behind him. "It's done," Durham confirmed. "Signed and processed." The terms were accepted exactly as you structured them. Victor nodded. And the final component? Durham placed a thick folder on the desk. Complete as requested. Irrevocable trust established. Documents notarized and filed. Olivia Reeves becomes the sole beneficiary of all assets surrendered by both parties, convertible to cash upon her graduation from Brown University. Victor allowed himself a genuine smile. Perfect. An elegant solution, Durham observed. They retained just enough hope to prevent complete despair, while everything of value they accumulated through betrayal ultimately benefits the one innocent party in all this. Elegant, yes, Victor agreed, but not yet complete. While Thomas and Marilyn began their lengthy prison terms, Victor implemented the final phase of his revenge, ensuring they could witness his triumph and their complete irrelevance to the future he was building. Through carefully established channels, they received quarterly updates on Phoenix Security's expanding success under Victor's renewed leadership. They learned of Olivia's academic achievements and the growing trust fund awaiting her. They saw photos of Victor receiving industry awards, opening international offices, and rebuilding the life they had tried to steal. Most painfully, they received documentation of the precise, systematic way Victor had orchestrated their downfall, not as a taunt, but as an after-action report detailing each vulnerability he had identified and exploited. The message was clear. Their destruction had not been emotional or impulsive, but calculated and inevitable from the moment they had betrayed him. The revenge was not just in their imprisonment or financial ruin, but in the comprehensive demonstration that they had been outmaneuvered at every turn by the man they had underestimated. Victor had not just reclaimed his life. He had turned their betrayal into the instrument of his greater success and their permanent destruction. Chapter 9. Phoenix Reborn. 5 years to the day after his exoneration, Victor Reeves stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of Philadelphia's Four Seasons Hotel. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Phoenix Security Solutions logo, redesigned during the company's expansion into international markets. Today marks not just an anniversary. Victor addressed the assembled crowd of employees, clients, and industry leaders, but a testament to resilience and transformation. The company had more than tripled in size under his renewed leadership, expanding beyond physical security into cybersecurity, intelligence analysis, and specialized protection services for high-risk environments. Phoenix had become the industry gold standard, with government contracts in 14 countries and a client list including half the Fortune 100. We've built something remarkable together, Victor continued, acknowledging key team members with a gesture. A security framework that adapts to emerging threats while never compromising our core values of integrity, innovation, and accountability. In the front row, Olivia Reeves watched her father with unmistakable pride. Now, completing her master's degree in international security studies at Georgetown, she had grown into a formidable young woman who occasionally consulted on special projects for Phoenix. The trust fund created from Marilyn and Thomas's surrendered assets had provided her complete financial independence, though she chose to earn her own way through merit rather than rely on inheritance. After the formal presentation, during the reception, Walter Durham approached Victor with a glass of champagne. Impressive performance, the older man noted. The stock jumped 6 points during your speech. Victor smiled slightly. The Saudi Arabia contract announcement certainly helped. Indeed, Durham lowered his voice. I received the quarterly update for our special projects. Thought you might want to know the current status. Victor nodded almost imperceptibly, and they moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. Durham continued discreetly. Thomas is 3 years into his paralegal training through the prison education program, making excellent progress. The minimum security arrangement continues to function as designed. And Marilyn? Victor asked, his expression revealing nothing. Running the women's literacy program at Montgomery. Exemplary behavior. Her first parole hearing is scheduled for next year, though approval is considered unlikely given the nature of her crimes. Victor absorbed this information with clinical detachment. The structured terms of their incarceration had been carefully designed, not out of mercy, but to create a specific psychological landscape. They retained just enough comfort and hope to make their punishment a prolonged experience rather than a simple period of deprivation. The possibility of eventual redemption made their current reality all the more poignant. The trust for Olivia exceeds projections, Durham added. With market performance and additional asset liquidations, it should reach 8 figures by her 30th birthday. Everything they might have enjoyed, Victor observed, now reserved for the one person they both claimed to care about, but were willing to traumatize for their own gain. Durham studied him thoughtfully. After all this time, I still can't determine if your revenge was an act of justice or calculated cruelty. Perhaps the most effective revenge incorporates both, Victor replied, and serves a constructive purpose beyond simple retribution. Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia joining them, radiant in a midnight blue evening gown. Dad, the Singapore team wants a photo with you before they leave. As Victor excused himself, Durham watched him cross the room, noting how attendees naturally deferred to his presence. The Victor Reeves who had emerged from prison was markedly different from the successful but somewhat conventional executive who had entered it. This Victor moved with the focused precision of a predator, controlled power evident in every gesture. Later that evening, as the event concluded, Victor found himself momentarily alone on the hotel terrace, looking out over the Philadelphia skyline. Detective Isabel Cortez, now Captain Cortez following her promotion, approached with 2 glasses of scotch. "Congratulations on the company milestone," she said, offering him a glass. 5 years of remarkable growth. "Thank you, Captain," Victor replied, accepting the drink. "Your presence is unexpected, but welcome." Professional curiosity, she admitted. Wanted to see how the story turned out. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their drinks. "They write to me occasionally," Cortez finally said. "From prison. Thomas more than Marilyn. Always with some new theory about how you manipulated the evidence or orchestrated their downfall." Victor raised an eyebrow. "And your response?" "I remind them that they confessed to all charges, signed detailed agreements, waived all appeals." She studied him carefully. "Though between us, I've always wondered how much of their situation was their own making and how much was guided." "An interesting philosophical question," Victor observed. "How much agency do people truly have when their psychological patterns make their choices predictable? If someone understands those patterns well enough to anticipate decisions, who bears responsibility for the outcomes?" Cortez smiled slightly. "Still not giving me a straight answer after all these years. Some questions are more valuable unresolved," Victor replied. "They keep us thoughtful." As Cortez prepared to leave, she hesitated. "One last thing I've always wondered. Why did you structure their plea deals to include eventual release? You could have pushed for life sentences." Victor considered the question carefully. Permanent imprisonment would have granted them a form of closure, a defined reality to adapt to. The possibility of freedom, remote but present, creates something else entirely. "Hope is punishment," Cortez concluded. "That's uniquely sophisticated." "Hope balanced with accountability," Victor corrected. "They retain the possibility of rebuilding some version of life, but never the one they try to steal, and never together." After Cortez departed, Victor remained on the terrace a while longer. His phone buzzed with a secure message from Alyssa, who still managed specialized monitoring systems for him. The quarterly recordings from Thomas and Marilyn's separate counseling sessions had been processed and were available for review. Victor considered listening, then decided against it. Their psychological states, while meticulously tracked, had become increasingly irrelevant to his present reality. The revenge that had once consumed his attention had accomplished its purpose. Justice had been served, though in a form no conventional court could have delivered. He returned to the ballroom, where Olivia waited with Derek Moss and a small group of loyal executives who had stood by him through the rebuilding. These were his people now, tested by adversity, proven through loyalty. "Everything okay, Dad?" Olivia asked as he rejoined them. "Everything is exactly as it should be," Victor replied, genuine warmth in his voice for his daughter alone. Later that night, in his rebuilt Villanova estate, completely redesigned to eliminate any trace of Maryland's presence. Victor sat in his study reviewing international expansion plans. The wall that had once displayed family photos now held a single framed document, his prison release paper, dated 5 years earlier. It served as a daily reminder, not of victimhood, but of transformation. Prison hadn't broken him. It had stripped away conventionality and restraint, revealing a more fundamental version of himself, strategic, patient, and absolutely unwavering once committed to a course of action. The betrayal by Marilyn and Thomas had cost him deeply, but had also catalyzed his evolution into someone more formidable than they could have imagined. In their attempt to destroy him, they had instead forged him into something more dangerous and more successful than he would have otherwise become. That was perhaps the most perfect revenge of all, that their betrayal had ultimately made him stronger while destroying them completely. They would live the remainder of their lives knowing they had not only failed, but had inadvertently created the architect of their own destruction. Victor closed the expansion plans and poured himself a small measure of rare scotch, allowing himself a moment of genuine satisfaction. The company was thriving. Olivia was flourishing. The future stretched before him with possibilities beyond what he had envisioned before his imprisonment. His revenge had been ruthless indeed, not in its violence or immediacy, but in its comprehensive thoroughness. He had not just reclaimed what was taken. He had systematically ensured that those who betrayed him would forever live with the knowledge that every aspect of their destruction had been by design. The perfect revenge wasn't just the punishment itself, but ensuring they understood, with absolute clarity, that they had been defeated not by chance or circumstance, but by the superior strategy of the man they had gravely underestimated. Victor Reeves raised his glass in a silent toast to the lesson they had taught him. That true power lay not in wealth or position, but in the ability to transform betrayal into triumph through unwavering resolve and meticulous execution. Phoenix had indeed risen from the ashes, stronger than before. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.